Hello, and thank you for tuning in. You are listening to the Bringing Inspiration to Earth show. You can listen and subscribe to the show for free on Spotify, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Blog Talk Radio, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Audible. For network or show information, visit biteradio.me. And now, the Bringing Inspiration to Earth show. Okay, with that, I'd like to go ahead and welcome Dina to the show. Good day, Dina.
Hi, Robert. Great to be here.
Thank you. I am looking forward to our conversation. I am a flower lover, so I've really learned a lot by reading your book, and so I'm looking forward to sharing that with the listeners. So let's start with when did your interest in flowers as therapies begin?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So it began quite early on in my life. I struggled with a lot of issues as a teenager and in my early life. And my life was sort of turned around when I found Dr. Edward Bach's book, Heal Thyself, which is his, exploration of flower therapy. And he is the father of flower therapy as we know it in modern times. And, the whole message is about how we can utilize, in this case, the agents of nature to heal emotional challenges. And so for me, that was just a very delicious idea that we could use the energy from flowers, something so accessible, something so beautiful, and something so gentle, but to work on a really deep level. So, I played with this idea and with his system of healing for about 30 years now. And it wasn't until about 7 or 8 years ago that I sort of started introducing it to clients. So it was a long journey of self-healing. And, that's sort of my passion, I would say, is healing and primarily self-healing. And so, it was about 30 years ago, and it's been just a beautiful process of self-discovery.
Yeah, it is a beautiful modality, both visually and through other senses as well. So what led you to do this Oracle deck with guidebook? What was how did that get born?
Right. So I began writing the affirmations as a way, excuse me, to sort of study the flower essences. So Dr. Bach lines out 38 different flowers, and each one connects us to a different emotional challenge. And then the idea is that we offer it the energy of the flowers. In this way, it's an internal process. We take the essences internally to help us to transform the negative emotions. And so when I was going through Bach's training, I sort of created affirmations like as flashcards as a way for me to remember what each flower was for. And then when I had started doing this, I started offering affirmations to friends, to family members. And one such person was an illustrator, Audrey, and she's the woman who did the drawings. And so we decided that we were just going to kind of put the two together sort of as a labor of love, I would say, as an art project. And then as I got more deeply involved with it, I thought, this would make a wonderful book. And then as I started shopping it around to different publishers, Schiffer is the publisher who picked it up, and it was their idea to make it into an oracle deck, which sort of to me was like a no-brainer. Like it was funny that I didn't see it. It was sort of right in front of me. But I mean, I just love it. I love that it's an oracle deck because not only does it add to the process of flower therapy if you're using remedies, but if you're not using remedies, it feels like a standalone process.
Yeah, that is true. So with the affirmations, did you just, I mean, in creating the affirmations, was it just you kind of going into like meditation and focusing on it, or what was the process for those, for writing those?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So I actually took one remedy a week to try to learn about it. And my idea was that if I focus on one remedy a week, then I will get more information about what the flower has to offer. Even though I was going through training and, they give us the flower indications, I sort of wanted to experience it myself. And so over that week-long process, I would just kind of jot down phrases and words and images that came to me. So it's great because in doing the editing for the book, I got to look back over my journals. And it's just, it's amazing to me that back then when I was like still kind of digging down into what each remedy meant, that I was experiencing the energy provided by each essence. And in that way I was enlivening it through the written word. I've always been a writer and love poetry and haiku and things like that. And so, just these beautiful phrases were sort of coming alive. And to me, like even now, I create a combination flower remedy for myself once a month. And I still read the affirmations out loud. And for me, it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing journey. Like I've been doing this work for 30 years and I still continue to learn more and more about what the flowers provide through the written word, but also, like I'm saying, through the energetic resonance that can be felt. So yes, it was a very meditative process.
Yeah, I think it's just wonderful to be able to have kind of immersed yourself, in those, weekly kinds of attention. Now, I did read in the guidebook, the book, that you had helped friends who had an organic flower farm, and you began to notice personalities of the flowers. So tell me about that, because I find that very interesting.
Yeah, I bet you do, because I've seen your photography, and apparently you're called to the energy of flowers, right? So, I think I was always a flower lover. I mean, who doesn't love flowers? And, I kept my own little patches of gardens here and there throughout my life. But it's true, I was asked by a good friend to help in harvesting their flowers. They were working for a farmer's market at the time, and they sold bouquets of flowers. But these two friends of mine, they had like I believe it was on 3 or 4 acres, an organic flower farm. And we would go out at the crack of dawn on Thursday mornings, right at sunup, and you can imagine when the dew collects on the flowers, right? We've all seen sort of images of that. And I remember how it just kind of drew me in to the effervescence of each flower. And that's kind of the only way I can explain it, because to experience it is really more profound, to be visually and physically present in a garden at sunrise, where you are in fact trying to communicate with the flowers. So these friends of mine were they're very spiritual people, and they sort of taught me how to harvest flowers without taking too much from the plant, and they know how to save seed and keep the regeneration going and give thanks and give gratitude for the flowers growing. And so, yes, I kind of like fell in love with each flower I was working with. I remember there were like patches of lavender that we would cut, and there was a certain time of day when you wanted the sun to kind of be higher up. So I was noticing, like, for instance, the erect way that lavender grows and the way it sort of reaches up toward the sun, and it's drought tolerant, so it's very it holds that energy of sort of the light, I would say. And so, I was just kind of communing with each flower in itself. And I guess at the time when I was in it, I wasn't doing flower therapy as a professional practice. So I didn't really realize then what the the spiritual indications were that would help people to transform emotions, even though I had been dabbling in flower remedies and working with the Bach system, I guess I really didn't know until years later when I was suffering from a severe physical illness that kind of came on out of the blue. I had a business that my husband and I were doing was a performing arts business where and it had suddenly closed. We couldn't afford to do this anymore. And I didn't know it at the time, but I had been suffering from a severe rash on both of my palms that then continued up both of my arms that then continued to my calves. Never had this before in my life. And I went to several doctors, allergists, just trying to find out like what it was, how I can rid myself of it. And it wasn't until I kind of paused and realized that there's always an emotional component, right? Whenever we're suffering from something physically, there always seems to be an emotional component at the root. So I think after working with some other healers who sort of led me down that path, I began realizing that I was suffering from depression because my business had closed, and I was getting to be like middle age and feeling sort of irrelevant, like where's my life going? What's my past? And I recalled that I had always been self-studying the healing arts my whole life since I was a teenager. And I decided to kind of delve deeper back into flower therapy. I was like, it called to me. I remembered it. And as I delved deeper into it, I began taking flower remedies that correlated to the emotions I was feeling around my illness. And at that time, the main emotion was sort of like a disconnection from life. I felt listless. I felt like I just couldn't kind of get back into life. And so I'm just going to throw it out there. The Bach remedy for that is wild rose. And so I used wild rose for a few weeks, and I remember day by day, my sense of being connected with life just kept expanding and opening up, and I didn't feel so depressed anymore. And so then I really wanted to seek out what it was that I needed in my life in order to fully heal and come into being. And that was really studying flower remedies. And so it was funny because I remember I did a Google search of flower essence classes, which if anybody does a search of that now, there's some out there, but even like 7 years ago, there really wasn't much outside of the Bach Center. But ironically, there was a class that was pretty close to where I was living at the time that was starting a few weeks later. It was a 6-week class in flower essence therapy. So I signed up for it. And at the same time, I also registered for the Bach Registered Foundation class. And I did the two simultaneously. And it just opened my eyes to a world of like self-healing. My rash began to clear up slowly but surely. And I never looked back. And then I just began not only healing myself even on a deeper level, but I began offering it to clients. And that was really like the turning point for me when I could see the work coming to life and really helping people to heal. And it's just been an amazing journey ever since.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Now, with you talk about flower essences. So, tell the listener, tell us exactly, what is it using extract, or what are the different ways that one would utilize, flower essence?
Yes. So the Bach Center in the UK still makes all of the 38 original Bach essences, many of them from the same plants that Dr. Bach used in 1930. And so they are herbal extracts, but they're not the same as herbal remedies which treat the physiological conditions, right? Like if we use echinacea when we're sick and it helps to build our immune system. The difference with flower essences or flower remedies is that they work on the more subtle energetic level. So it's more of like the spiritual property of the flower that then relates to the corresponding emotional challenge, not the physical challenge. So when we're working with clients or when I'm working with students, I like to remind them that we're not prescribing based on the physical challenge. So that's not to say that I don't work with people who have physical challenge. Many people come to me suffering from all sorts of physical challenge. But the idea is to get to the emotional part of the physical challenge. So how is this physical challenge making you feel? Is it making you sad? Is it making you angry? And then kind of like peeling back the layers from there. So then we can prescribe the corresponding remedies. And the remedies are in fact taken internally. But when I say it's the subtle or the spiritual energy of the plant, what I mean is that it's more of a homeopathic dose. So like I said, it's not the physical property of the plant that treats physiological illness. It's the very minute essence, energy of the flower. So the way these are created is they cut the flowers in full bloom. Most of them, I believe, are still set out in the sunlight. So the sun catalyzes the energy of the flower that's set in a bowl of water. And then we take that energized water and we preserve it. And then you're able to take the remedies internally. So I think most listeners are probably understand what homeopathic medicine is, right? Do you, Robert?
Yes.
Yes,
And
yes.
most of my listeners probably do.
Sure. So it is considered in the UK, it is considered homeopathy. So it's the very subtle energy of the plant, of the flower.
Yeah. Okay. That's great to know. And we're going to, in the second half of the show, I want to kind of talk a bit about those different emotional challenges. Can one of the things I also read in the book was that you indicate that healing from trauma is an endeavor that requires courage and patience. So, for those listening who, want to have a real quick fix, that this, they might want to consider the fact that it. So can you tell us a little bit about the idea that it requires courage and patience?
Yeah, I love those two words. Well, I think courage to be able to face the trauma or face our challenges with emotional honesty, courage to be able to step up and do the work of healing. So, even though I think that the energy of the flowers is deeply profound spiritual medicine, I think to begin with it, you need to be able to take on the work of healing, because I don't think it's magic. Okay, I mean, I do think there's magical components of it, but I don't think that it's magic. I think what's more magical is our ability to heal. Okay, I think we all came into this world with an innate ability to heal ourselves. But it does take courage to sort of recognize that within ourselves. So that's like another form of work that I do with people is I do a lot of creative visualizing. I do, guided visualization work. And one of the things we do is see yourself as your own healer. Like see yourself as your healer self. And whenever we go into this vision, the way we see ourselves is really strong, empowered, resourceful, resilient. And so that's like, that's what's at the root of taking on any modality, any therapy, is you step up to being your healer self, which is courageous. And then patience, because healing is a lifelong practice. And I know that many people who are suffering just want to alleviate the suffering. And they don't want it, to be a lifelong practice. But the good news about that is that when we see it as a lifelong practice, we see everything that is in our past as an opportunity for growth and learning. And that's all that it is. So we begin to transform maybe our negative beliefs about what pain is or what illness is, or, the difficulties in healing, it's really quite easy if you embrace a healer's mindset. And I assure everybody, all of my students, everyone I've ever worked with, that you came into this world knowing how to do this. It's just that life got in the way. And so when we can kind of like get out of our own way of like negative thought patterns or seeing ourselves as small, then everything just opens up before us.
Yeah, very much so. Guys, we're about halfway through the show already, Dina, so I want to take just a quick 90-second break. And then when we come back, I want to go and discuss some of the challenges, the emotional challenges, and the flowers that can help in that healing process. Okay? So hold on, we'll be right back.
Beautiful.
Hello, this is Robert Sharpe. I want to thank you for joining us, and I hope that you are enjoying today's show. Just a reminder that we have a wealth of information and resources available on our website, biteradio.me. There is a calendar of upcoming shows, along with an archive link that will give you access to more than 1,600 shows that we have had during the past 12 years. Also on the site is a link to the products and services we provide: books, nature photography, calendars, and 5x7 photo greeting cards. Our show is a free podcast on Blog Talk Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and TuneIn. And you can subscribe for free on any of those platforms by using the links on our website homepage. We are on social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, etc. And we also have buttons to those platforms on the top of our homepage. Our website, biteradio.me, has much for you to explore and enjoy. I also very much appreciate you supporting our guests, and especially today's guest. And now, back to the show. Okay, everyone. Thank you for staying with us again today. My special guest is Dina Saalisi, and we are talking about her new Oracle deck and guidebook, Listening to Flowers, Positive Affirmations to Invoke the Healing Energy of the 38 Bach Flowers. And again, you can find out more about this deck and other services that Dina has to offer by visiting her website, which is dinasaalisi.com. And that's DINASAALISI.com. Okay, with that, we're back, Dina.
Hi, we're back.
Great. So I want to go through and talk about just some of the emotional challenges that are addressed with the deck. And let's start with fear. Fear was the first one listed. And it's one that I think really affects so many people. But in that particular section, you talked about there were different types of fears and different types of flower essences to address them. So can you talk a little bit about, just the importance of the emotion fear and maybe, a particular flower fear kind of combination?
Yes. So, Dr. Bach lined out 7 different categories of emotional challenge, and then the 38 flowers each fit into those 7 categories. So fear is the very first one that he has lined out. So I did the book and the flowers in his order. So, I feel like fear is the first one because, like you just said, it's so relatable, right? I mean, we've all experienced fear, and then the idea that there could be at least, but he named 5 different ways that fear shows up for us. So, the most common way that fear shows up, I would say, is in fears that we can name. So that's like anything, like public speaking. I'm afraid of spiders. I'm afraid of flying on an airplane. And that's the mimulus flower. So it's definitely of the 5 fear flowers, I think it's the most widely used. And it was actually my entree flower. Like when I first started working with flower therapy personally, and, the first flower that I reached for was Mimulus. I was a really shy, intimidated child and even a young adult. And, just the fact that I'm here now speaking with you on this podcast is proof that the Mimulus remedy works, because I worked with it. And as I worked with it as a young adult, I began to break out of my shell. And I could remember prior to that time, fear for me was being afraid to use my voice. And, I really came into my own in part and parcel from this flower. And then there's another way, another level of fear is when we can't name the fear. Like we just kind of feel afraid, but we don't know why. It's sort of like a free floating anxiety feeling. And that's aspen remedy. And anyone who's ever observed an aspen tree knows that at the slightest breeze, it quakes, it shivers. And that's one way that I remembered what aspen was used for when I was burning, because of the shaking you kind of feel inside. And interestingly, when we were in the throes of the pandemic, I remember I was just getting so many people that were afraid, and they didn't know why. Like, sure, they could name, I'm afraid of getting sick, but it was more like a free-floating feeling of fear. I used so much aspen with people during that pandemic time, and you know what? Everybody was just telling me how great it was to feel a sense of inner calm and inner peace and stability through the lens of the aspen flower. So those are just two of the fear remedies. I don't want to, go into them all because I don't want to complicate it too much right now. But yeah.
No, okay, that's great. Yeah, and I think that's particularly during the pandemic, the period of the pandemic, there was a lot of free floating fear and anxiety, that people experienced. Now, one of the other areas that I think is also very relevant to our recent human experience is the third one, which is insufficient interest in present circumstances.
Yeah.
And I thought, that is an interesting topic. Anyway, and under that one, you also had indicated insomnia and depression as part of items that fall into that area. So tell us a little bit about the idea of insufficient interest in present circumstance.
Yeah, and I love that you picked that one out because, like I said, I used Dr. Bach's exact language, and some of it is like, that's a mouthful, right? But I love that it made sense to you because it's super relatable. Like, we talk about insomnia, and again, when we're prescribing flower remedies, we're really careful to not say this one's for insomnia. It's more like, if someone's suffering insomnia, how does it show up for them? And oftentimes when we can't sleep, it's because of an overactive mind, right? Like I know when I have trouble sleeping, it's because I'm lying there sort of replaying scenarios in my mind about things that were said or, just not being able to turn my mind off. And so that's white chestnut. And that one is also, I think at one time it was the #1 prescribed flower remedy. I don't know if it still is, but it's, again, super relevant. And again, when we're overthinking, when we're lost in worry, we're not present, right? So that's the inability to be present, to be present. Another one is the wild rose I talked about, is sort of when we have a disconnection from life, when we're suffering apathy, then we're not able to be present. So these are the ones that sort of bring us back to our presence, bring us back to our connection with life. And I think they're more relevant than ever, really, this category.
Yeah, it is, and I think there is a desire to avoid present circumstances. I mean,
Yeah.
not that they're insufficient interest, but I mean, it is, I guess, an escape to try and block out or try to just ignore some present
Mhm.
circumstances, and quite honestly, when we're looking at the state of the world, there are just so many unusual happenings, that
Yeah.
can be stress creating, that it's one might begin to wonder, what is this present all about? Is this necessary, kind of thing?
Well, you're right about that. And I do think that because there's so much pain and suffering, like sometimes we do just want to block it out. And that's kind of when we go
Hmm.
into like habit patterns. It's just, how do we escape? But I think that we don't ever really escape it anyway. Like we could say, oh, I'm just going to, look over here, don't look there, look over
Hmm.
here. And in that way I'm protecting myself. But I think we begin to suffer in the inner sense. That whether it comes up through nightmares or addiction or bad relationships, it finds us. So that's what I love so much about this healing modality or, any holistic healing modality, but this is just my healing modality of choice, is that it kind of allows us to go into the scary places, but it holds us. And that's what the flowers like especially do. That, I tell people, if you're not ready for this, it's not like you're going to take the remedy and all of a sudden things are going to, the trauma's going to come up and you're not going to be able to handle it. The whole essence of flower therapy is that it puts us into a state that we're able to connect with the deeper energy that holds us. So it helps us to get through it. So like, for instance, mustard is the remedy when we feel a sense of depression for no known reason, when it just kind of comes on. Could be at the end of a long, dark winter. It could be we're just not really aware. Maybe we're not looking at what it is that's making us feel so dark. But so what the remedy would do then is it's not like it would make us remember the trauma and then we would have to go into hiding. More what it would do is it would support the healing. So that's the great thing about the flowers is it's only going to take you as deep as you're ready to go. And it's always going to bring you to a place within yourself where you can handle it. They're there to support.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can see, the idea of it being kind of a safe way to work through some of those emotional challenges. Now, one of the other ones I thought that was interesting too was oversensitive to influences and ideas. Boy, there are, yeah, we just have to look at social media to see
Yeah.
about influences and ideas. But tell us a little bit about that kind of emotional challenge and how a flower therapy might be able to assist.
Yeah, well, oversensitivity, again, I think is getting more and more relatable. Like you just said with social media, it's like, we're looking outward into other people's lives and then we connect with it in a way that maybe we don't want to, right? Whether we're comparing
Mm-hmm.
ourselves to
Mm-hmm.
other people or we're jealous or whatever it is, right? There's this sensitivity. I think too, like just with the world, with the world getting seemingly so much more intense, because we have all this media that we can kind of, see the news all the time or hear what other people are thinking, that there is more and more people who identify as sensitive beings in this world, and I definitely identify as a sensitive person. And so there are 4 remedies in this category, and the one that I feel like is that just about everyone can relate to is the walnut flower. And so one way that I remembered when I was studying what walnut was for, when we look at a walnut, right, the hard shell is protecting the fruit that's on the inside. So one of the things that walnut remedy does is it protects us from outside energies. So anybody who can feel easily the energies of others, maybe when they go out in public, or people who, who are therapists, or anybody, who works on an emotional level with other people, oftentimes at the end of the day, we can feel absorbent of the energy of others. So the walnut flower really gives us that sense of protection, that boundary, right? And so this one has been helpful, I think, probably with everybody I've ever worked with. And so actually I keep it on my desk. I make a spray of the rescue remedy, which we'll talk about in a minute, and walnut flower, and I spray it in my space after I've met with a client, and just to kind of neutralize the air, neutralize the energy. I love walnut for that. And then, I don't want to get too much into the other oversensitivity flowers because they're a little deeper, they're a little more complex, but walnut, for anyone who feels outside energy, I highly recommend.
Yeah, and I like the affirmation for walnut. Is my boundaries are resilient as I encounter external forces. I am protected as I cross over thresholds of change, and I trust my sensitive awareness to guide me. It sounds like it's a wonderful affirmation of protection, being true to oneself in a way.
Thank you for reading that. Absolutely. And that points out what I was saying earlier about how if, you're not using flower remedies, if you just want to work with the essence of the remedies, the essence of the flowers themselves with the book and the deck, sometimes I'm out in the world and I don't have my remedies with me and I might be feeling a little vulnerable. And so the affirmations just sort of come to me because I know them so well. But that first line, my boundaries are resilient as I encounter external forces, I can just simply remind myself of that, right? To just catalyze some of the healing energy, and that works too.
Yeah, exactly. So, one of the last one I want to talk about is the overcare for welfare of others. And that one kind of stuck out to me because, we are in a period where, care for others has, kind of been in the forefront, of our daily lives. And then, the idea of maybe others not having that same kind of caring sense of being kind of can create challenges. So can you talk a little bit about the idea of overcare for the welfare of others?
Yeah, so that's an interesting way that Dr. Bach puts it, overcare for welfare of others, because when you get to know these 5 flowers, it's interesting. It's why these are the control flowers. I call them the control flowers for kind of to give you context. And why do people feel a need to control or a need to manipulate is often because they feel unsafe. And so when we're trying to be domineering of others, vine is the one of those 5 flowers that is most about domination, control, intensity. And, it seems like that a vine type person would just want to dominate someone they're in relationship with. But why? It's not necessarily that they care so much, but more that they don't feel so confident in who they are. So this category, it is a little tricky, and I love teaching it because when I teach it to students and clients, we really kind of dig into these maybe, not so nice parts of ourselves. Like how do I look at the vine inside myself? When am I holding on so tightly that I can't just trust? So I would say they're about trust. They're about relinquishing control and just seeing that relationships really flow a lot better when we're not trying to control them. So I would say all 5 of these flowers have an aspect of control in relationship. So, yeah, like, let's just look at the vine. I just want to look at the vine affirmation. I practice tolerance in my relationships, right? As I relinquish control, I find freedom within. I love that line. Just when I'm letting go, I'm actually getting more freedom. Like, oftentimes we think that when we're holding tightly, we're going to get what we want. And then in letting go, I create true power. So, I mean, that says so much, right?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the idea of control, and particularly when it comes to relationships, that for some people, it can be that letting go can be a real challenge. I mean, the idea of allowing the other person, kind of to be who they are, and not to try and control a relationship, but letting go can be for some people can be a real challenge. I know for me, years letting go was a real challenge for me, and after learning, and recognizing that, it feels so much better, to just allow rather than try and dictate.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that, Robert. It feels better on the inside, and that's the whole point, is like, we know when something feels amiss on the inside. And so that's why, this sort of work helps us to really touch what it is we're feeling without shame, without guilt, and then just kind of go into how we can transform it within ourselves. Because like you said, when it is transformed, you feel so much better, right? So that's the end goal, for sure, is to, feel freer on the inside.
Oh, exactly. And I think we all can use a little bit of that, a lot of that, actually.
Yeah.
Now, we talked a little bit, and you mentioned about the emergency formula. There's Dr. Bach's emergency formula, and it's a 5-flower formula. So tell us about that, because it sounds like, when you're dealing with intense trauma, that would be a go-to kind of essence.
Yeah, absolutely. So the emergency formula, it lives under the brand name of Rescue Remedy, which I think most people really do know what that is. If they're unfamiliar with the rest of the flowers, they've seen Rescue Remedy at the pharmacy, at the Whole Foods. And it is Dr. Bach's only combination formula that he created. It consists of 5 flowers. 2 of them are in the fear category, and he created it because he wanted to have a formula on hand to give to people for acute instances of trauma. And we can talk about trauma like capital T trauma, like I was in an automobile accident and I'm in the hospital, that's super traumatic. Lowercase trauma could be like, lowercase t trauma could be like I got into a fight with my partner and now my nerves are kind of jangled, right? So you can use Rescue Remedy in either case. And the idea is when you feel a sense of acute intensity, intense emotion, and you just kind of want to bring it back to center. You take 4 drops of it as often as needed to kind of bring you back to this state of presence. And it usually only takes me 2 or 3 doses. So the other way is it can be used prophylactically, like if you're going for a doctor's exam and you're really nervous, or you're going to take a test, a written test, and you're really nervous. You can kind of take it to quell your emotions. And I also tell students and clients to definitely keep a bottle on hand. I keep a bottle in my purse, and so it's with me at all times. But kind of if you're doing this sort of reflective, energetic healing work, and maybe you're kind of confused and you're not really knowing where to turn or what it is you're feeling, you just kind of feel intensified. you can take Rescue Remedy for a day or two to sort of open up your emotional picture and kind of then be able to more home in on what it is you need. And so, yes, for a lot of clients who I'm starting out with, if they're suffering from really extreme trauma, I'll just give them Rescue Remedy for about a week or two before we do any other work. And it always does the trick of kind of bringing them back to center so that then they can actually reflect on what the deeper needs or emotions are.
Okay, great. Now we've been talking about, the using the essence, using the formulas, in as a healing therapy. In what other way, other than actually partaking in the essences, can one still bring that energy, that essence, into their life? Like, for example, your Oracle deck. You've got the wonderful photos. I mean, the illustrations and affirmations. So, that I guess would be one way of being able to bring them in. Are there any other ways that one can partake of the essence without having to, internalize, the actual formula?
Yeah. Well, I think the best way is to be in nature. I mean, I think that nature is always going to hold us and heal us. I myself I try to grow as many of the Bach flowers as I can so that I can really go and be with them in person and watch their growth habits throughout the year. I mean, you know this through your photographer's lens that, you're witnessing the flowers. And I imagine that every time you go out into nature that you are touching the energy of the flowers and it's making you feel fulfilled. It's making you feel more whole. That's why you do it, right? And so I think that being in the energy of nature is the best way to connect with any of the healing energy of any of the flowers. I just believe that. And I myself, go on hikes often. I go to parks. I go to botanical gardens. I tell people that, if you can go outside every single day, even if it's just to be in your own backyard and really just sit mindfully, quietly, and absorb the energy, it's there. You feel it. I've never not had a person who didn't feel the energy that they're held with in nature. So I think that that's the best way. I also think another way that I love to connect with the energy of the flowers is to sketch them. So taking pictures is one way. I also like to take pictures of flowers, but sketching them. I learn so much about a flower by sketching it. Like I could be working with the remedies for years and years, and then I have the opportunity to sketch the flower, and I learn so much more. I gain so much more information. So those are just a couple of simple ways. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and you're right. Well, when I'm out photographing flowers, quite often it'll seem like I am hearing the flower calling, take my picture, and then I'll go out, it's like, okay, let me see what your best side is here, and look around and, kind of, like for example, with the hibiscus with the big stem coming out of the center of the stamen, I guess that is so distinctive, and it's like, to me, that flower is saying, this is me reaching out, this is my reaching out kind of, so anyway, but I think that, it is a wonderful, in addition to the idea of stopping and smelling the roses and all the other kinds of, things that, support, a nature connection is wonderful. So, gosh, we're down toward the end of the show, Dina. So, is there what is it that you hope that the user of the Oracle deck will gain by its use?
Well, I imagine that everyone who wants to discover the oracle deck, that it will enliven their sense of the energy of flowers, that it will inspire them to go out and be with the flowers and to just keep listening to flowers. I felt like that was such a powerful title, because when we're connecting with the energy of nature, we really are listening. We're listening for what is being called to be heard. And, to just hear the resonance of the flowers that's connected in our own souls. That's what my hope is for everyone who connects with my oracle deck.
Yeah, it is wonderful. Yeah, and I can see the healing capability that your deck provides, and the affirmations as I've gone through that are all wonderful, positive affirmations, and simple. And I think that's also a key to that connection, isn't it? Is having it simple and not have to think a lot. Kind of that would be basic.
Yes, agreed, Robert.
Well, Dina, this has really been a treat. I really want to thank you, and I know that when I go out and take pictures tomorrow, the flowers, I will be opening my ears and my mind a little bit wider to hear what maybe they're saying. So I appreciate that as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for a beautiful time, Robert. I appreciate you.
You're very welcome. Again, everyone, today my special guest has been Dina Saalisi, and we have been talking about her new Oracle deck and guidebook, Listening to Flowers, Positive Affirmations to Invoke the Healing Energy of the 38 Bach Flowers. And again, you can find out more by visiting her website, which is dinasaalisi.com, and that's DINASAALISI.com. And everyone, I want to thank you for joining us for this edition of the Bringing Inspiration to Earth show. And until we meet again, thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to the Bringing Inspiration to Earth show. Remember, our show is available as a free podcast from Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Blog Talk Radio, Amazon Music, and Audible. To follow our show on any of those platforms, visit biteradio.me and select the one you use most. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Bite Radio Me. Until we meet again, remember to be a bright light by bringing inspiration to your world and to the lives of those you touch.